I'ma keep it a bean. Stick to the script every scene. This from last year, but they clean. Say to say, I'ma take something else, but it's winning team. Charlie Sheen, fam gang the regime. I'm from Potty Green.
What's good, Shellitronnn here. You can call me Shells, and I'm back at it again with a brand new video. And today, I want to talk about what you can see right here on your screen. Headline reads, Panthers agree to terms with 17 undrafted free agents. And I'll be talking about most of these guys, but there are going to be 3 guys I'm going to do actual individual videos on, focusing on them specifically. Those are going to be linebackers Jordan Mack and Chris Orr. And kind of surprised, a wide receiver named Omar Bayless, who might be one of the biggest steals in the UDFA market, a guy who was very, very impressive. But for the most part, I'll be just going over really quickly these other 14 guys that the Panthers did sign the contracts. I'm not going to do too much very in-depth content on these guys, because for the most part, these are going to be guys who will be third string players if they make the squad, or maybe even camp bodies, guys who will not make the 53-man roster. But there are still some interesting players in this list of guys who I won't be doing a very specific video focusing on them, guys who I think have a very strong chance of making the final roster that's going to come out around late August, September-ish. So without any further ado, let's get right into it with Myles Adams out of Rice. This is the guy right here who's a pretty solid defensive lineman. I think he can play inside and outside. He played in the Conference USA, which, if you guys know anything about the CUSA, it is not very competitive there. But still, he had 94 total tackles, 4.5 sacks over 4 years, with 10.5 for a loss. That is not great, but I mean, for UDFA, for a guy who might be a depth piece, and for a position group that's kind of confusing for the Panthers. You know, we have a lot of outside linebackers, and we have some defensive ends, but for the most part, we have guys who are tweeners, guys who are maybe a little bit too small to play defensive end, but kind of too big and too bulky to play outside linebacker, and guys who play outside linebacker who have the opposite problems, guys who are only situational. We have 3 or 4 dudes who are really just pass rushers, pass rush specialists, who really can't do much else. They can't cover really. They can't really put their hand in the dirt in the 4-3 and be effective down after down. So there is an argument to be made that you can add another player to the defensive end depth chart, but that's another roster spot. In a position group between defensive ends and outside linebackers who aren't 3-down linebackers, it's kind of deep, and you're giving another spot to that group. It's kind of hard to actually, go through with that. So I'm not really sure if he has a role here, but he is one of the guys who, just by virtue of his position group, might have a chance of making one of those last spots on the roster. Omar Bayless, I'm going to talk about him a little bit more. This guy is extremely impressive. I'm kind of surprised he did not get drafted after considering some of the guys who went in the 7th round. I think he really could have got a 7th round pick, but I'll get deeper into why I think that may have been an issue a little bit later on today. Then we have Bowen, who's a tackle out of Ohio State. Look, this man got hurt, and honestly, we've had our fill of guys who have been on the O-line get hurt. I don't know how I feel about this, but as a UDFA and the team didn't actually use a draft pick, I can't be too mad about it. Bowen is not a bad tackle, but I do have an issue with picking up O-linemen with injury history, because we've picked up guys who had injury history before coming to the team, and we've had guys who we drafted or signed, and then they come in and they get injured, and they kind of stay injured, or once they get healthy again, they're not the same player. We've seen it happen several times in each of those scenarios. So right here, not actually spending anything on getting Bowen, seeing what he can do. He may just be a camp body, but in a kind of position group like the tackle spot where there's a lot of confusion, maybe he can go inside and play guard a little bit, and that position group has even more confusion. There could be some maybe argument for him maybe making the back end of the roster, but like I said, injury history makes me kind of worried about that. Then we get to Jason Ferris out of Montana Western, and look, if you thought the Conference USA was bad, then you ain't going to like very much about what you're going to see from this kind of conference, the NAIA. And I'm not going to lie to you, although there have been some really good players who have come from these lower division of colleges, and it could be because of academics, could be because of some other stuff that happens, but for the most part, it's very hard to think about how someone's performance on that competitive level is going to translate to the NFL, and if it would have even translated at the actual Division I level of college. So for me, I know we have a very weird weakness at linebacker, but there are better guys we picked up in this UDFA class, and I think Jason Ferris may not actually make the roster here. He could be a good camp body, get guys competitive and whatnot, but I don't see him making the roster. Sam Franklin out of Temple is a guy who I think is, he's one of these pocket picks. And there are a couple of these pocket picks that you see Matt Rule pick up. There's one guy from Temple, and there's another guy who went to Baylor who we'll get down to in a little bit. He's like the last guy on this list. He's a tackle. But this is a player who, Sam Franklin, he was a DB at one point. Then he went to linebacker, so he's kind of a fast guy. I think he ran a 4.58. I don't think he went to the actual combine, and I don't know if he actually had his pro day already with Temple, but from the thing that I saw in 2019, he ran a 4.58 40. I think he even ran some unofficial faster times, but around that range for a linebacker is a good speed. Now, for the most part, his stats really aren't all that convincing or impressive. He did get better each year he was at Temple, but for the most part, just last season he had 69 tackles, 7.5 for a loss, 1 sack. The year before that, he had 3 sacks, 7 for a loss, 63 tackles. It's not that he's a bad linebacker. He has gotten an interception in the last 2 years, but he's not really a guy that I think will make this roster. Although he is fast, he could be someone who could make the roster as a guy in the special teams, kickoff return, kickoff, and you can see what he does from there. But going down, we see Myles Hartsfield. He's a DB out of Mississippi. This is a guy who I think played pretty decently. Not horrible, but definitely not great. I don't think we need very many more DBs on the roster. This is purely a move to get guys motivated, to have a sense of competition. We already have enough players that we drafted, and we did draft 4 defensive backs who have some pretty easy to identify flaws in their game, and it's going to take enough work to just coach that out of those guys without, having these guys come in. It's not even close what their talent level is. I don't dislike Myles Hartsfield, but I do think of the guys you already have, he may not actually have a chance to make this roster. Then we have Trevante Heights, who, look, man, I'm not going to lie to you. He has literally no stats, and our wide receiver group is way too packed full of talent. We got DJ Curtis, and we have Robbie Anderson. Not to mention, we just gave Christian McCaffrey a bunch of money. When you give C-Mac a bunch of money, or any player a bunch of money, you don't put less responsibility on them. You put more on them. So he's going to be, at best, the 5th option. Any receiver we bring in will be the 5th option for the team. So I don't see Trevante Heights doing very much for this roster. He could be a guy who gives us another target to pass to. Teddy Bridgewater can, if DJ gets tired or Curtis gets tired, hey Trey, come on the field, bro. We need you to run a little, run a post, or honestly, whatever. Do what you got to do, bro. Just run a route. Teddy going to throw you the ball, bro. And then that's going to be that. We moved down to Mike Horton out of Auburn. He is a guard. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't really know much about his game. I'm not going to really break down the form, the hand fighting, the technique of a guard who went to Auburn. I'm not going to lie, bro. This is a good pickup, though, because there is a lot of confusion about what exactly we're going to be doing at this position. We don't know who's going to be starting. We don't know if we're going to move one of our tackles inside. There's a lot of talk about, different guys playing in different spots. We did not draft anyone on the line, either inside or outside. There are some questions about Matt Paradis at the center position, so I can maybe see Mike Horton having a puncher's chance at making this roster. He can play both sides of the center, and that gives him a little bit of value for this team specifically. We go on to Jordan Mack, a guy who I think, like I said, might make this roster, a guy who I think is a little bit, he has some injuries, right? He has some injuries, but those are the kind of things that you might be willing to look past if you're very desperate at the linebacker position. And it's not like we're desperate, but we do have room to bring more players on who can be good, and Jordan Mack did not get drafted mostly because of his injuries. Simple as that. I think he has a shot to make this roster. We're going to give him the full physical and all that kind of stuff. But I think with his talent level, he could be someone who can have an impact on this team. I'll do a deeper video on him a little bit later on today. We go down to Fredrik Malagoya. I did not say that right. I promise you that. My fault, brother. He went to Washington State. He's a center. I think there's a very clear and obvious reason why he was brought on. He might be able to make the roster. I'm not all that sure. But since we already are in for Matt Paradis for this season alone, at least, then we're going to have to run with him. I mean, it's not like he's not going to lose his job, right? Matt Paradis will not lose his job this season. He could be cut after this year, even though he did sign a 3-year contract. He could be cut after this season, and I don't see Fredrik being the starter after this year either, but this is going to be a good little depth piece where he could make the team just because there is a lot of question marks on the offensive line no matter where you look other than Taylor Moton, honestly. We go down to Chris Orr, another guy who I think has a very strong shot at making the roster. For him, I'm going to actually not talk about him at all in this video because I really want to get into him in detail in my video talking about him specifically, because Chris Orr, of the 3 guys I named at the beginning of the video, I think has the best shot of making this team. So look out for that video. Coming down to David Reese, another linebacker out of Florida. Are y'all noticing something here? Even in our UDFAs, we are focusing primarily on defense. We do see some linemen coming in. We saw a couple of receivers, or we will see a couple of receivers, but we are still focusing on defense. The plan is the plan. It's not like we said we're going to just draft all deep into the draft and then like scurry at the end of the draft and the UDFAs and whatnot and try to get offensive players who are on the scrap heap. Like, nah. The plan is we bolster our defense in the draft and after the draft. We want to make sure we have the best players available on defense. David Reese is a guy who really just got hurt a lot. The man that was just injury prone, honestly, but he still looked good when he was playing at Florida. Like you can see, 94 tackles, 6.5 for a loss, 2 sacks in just his senior season, just past year. But like I mentioned, the man just can't stay on the field. So that's going to be an issue for us. There's a lot of linebackers that we're looking at in the UDFA class, and a couple of them have some injury history. So we're looking at guys everywhere we can. It shows that we are just a little bit desperate at this position, but like it's like a minimal level of desperate, like not enough to actually use draft picks. But we are going pretty deep down the pile for guys at the linebacker position, guys who are kind of risks, where you can either boom or bust there. Not like a bust, like a draft bust, but like just say, okay, we made the wrong decision here. He is injury prone. We really can't use him at this level for years to come. So it is what it is. But at least in this case, you didn't use any draft capital on him. Even like a 7th round pick, you got him after the draft. And this could be a good, I think, competition. He could make the roster maybe, but it's going to be about determining just how sturdy his body is. He's obviously tough. This is obviously a tough dude. But if your body can't hold up to the NFL, it's going to be a problem for a team that needs to look for something to help their defense out right now. Giovanni Ricci out of Western Michigan. This is a guy who played some receiver when he first got to college, turned to a tight end. And look, the thing about him is, yeah, senior season, he had 600 yards receiving, and he looked pretty all right. He looked pretty all right. But the biggest problem about Giovanni is that even though he did put on some weight to switch over to tight end, he blocks like a receiver who was converted to the position, so he will not block. He just will not provide any sort of protection for the quarterback. So if he's on the field, it's either a free sack or he's going to be releasing and going out for a route. So you obviously can diagnose the play off of that. It's probably going to be a pass if he touches your field. So it is what it is, man. I just don't want any more tight ends on the roster who can't block. Ian Thomas can block. We also have Tamarick Hemingway, who played on the practice squad last year. I don't know, played on the practice squad, but he was on the practice squad last year, who's a big dude. We know about Chris Manhertz, who is a primarily blocking tight end, and we already have a fullback on the roster. 3 tight ends and a fullback is a bad way to build a roster. I don't like it at all. I'm straight with going into the season with Ian Thomas, Chris Manhertz, and Alex Arma as our 3 guys who can, fullback, tight end interchangeably. That's cool with me. No real issue with Giovanni Ricci as a big kind of receiver, but as a tight end, I hate the prospect of him being on the field, and it just makes things kind of horrible for us. Austrian Robinson out of Mississippi, defensive tackle. I'm not really all that sure if there is going to be room for him on this roster. I think we pretty much got our spots locked up there. You don't want to put too much depth on that D-line, and if you do, you're probably looking more at finding a guy who can play on the edge more. I just don't know if this roster can hold him with the other needs that we have, especially at linebacker, maybe even O-line. We might need to get someone at receiver, and obviously, I gotta say it again, linebacker does need at least one more guy who can play every down. I just don't think the roster can hold another defensive tackle in place of a linebacker or an old lineman. You know what I'm saying? So when it breaks down to the 53-man roster, I just don't see it happening. And then we get to Rodney Smith, who's another guy out of Minnesota. And this is a guy who, if we hadn't already drafted Jordan Scarlett, and if we didn't already have Reggie Bonifant on the roster, two guys who I think could have had a bigger impact on the team. We saw for 100% fact, Reggie had an impact in at least one game, but then we never used him again. And we know that Ron Rivera hates rookies. He hates young guys, does not want them touching his field. So it is what it is there. But Rodney Smith is a player who I think really could have made the squad if we didn't already have an abundance of pretty good players back there already. I mean, what do? I feel like the only way you can fit Rodney Smith on this roster is if you either cut Alex Arma or you cut one of Reggie Bonifant or Jordan Scarlett. And I think both those guys have something to give. I guess the easier one to cut would be Jordan Scarlett, even though I like him a little bit more than Reggie Bonifant because he's a power back. But he did get injured near the end of last year. You can just say, look, you got hurt, bro, so you're out of here. But Rodney Smith has some impressive stats. Just this past season, he had 1,100 yards, almost 1,200 on the ground. 2017, he had 977. 2016, he had 1158. This man can run the ball. And he's not like a burst speed kind of guy. He has like one speed and it's fast, but it's not like a guy who's going to like juke anyone out. He has a one cut and that's basically it. He ain't going to spin on you. He ain't going to put you in the dirt or whatever. But you know, he is a solid running back who could be a very, very good, you know, second option in the run game. And he can catch a little bit. It's not like he's going to do it too often, honestly. It's not really a big strength of his, but it's in his bag, you feel me? But one thing about Rodney that could be in his favor is that he does have experience in kickoff returns. In the last couple of years, he did have 20 kickoff returns, and he averaged about 20-ish yards per return in each of those. So, I mean, it's not like he has a lot of them, but he has experience, and it could be good to have another guy on the roster other than Pharoh Cooper who has experience with returning kicks and punts, because we saw what happened last year when we put all of our kick and punt return eggs in one basket and it didn't work out, and we tried time and time again to find someone and it did not work out all season. I know we have Pharoh Cooper, but you need to have another backup plan, right? You don't just say, well, there's one guy back there and that's all we need. That never works in any situation ever in life. You need a backup plan. So this could be a guy who maybe makes the roster off the back of that. That could be like the last straw that breaks the camel's back for either Reggie or Jordan's roster spot. We'll see how that works out, because I think this is the biggest example of a fringe guy other than those first three guys I mentioned at the top of the video. But moving on, we have Cam Sutton, a tight end out of Fresno State. I have no need for another tight end. I don't want to say it again. I mean, he's not impressive at all. I don't dislike him, but I have nothing for him, bro. I really have nothing for Cam Sutton. And plus, he really didn't do anything at all in college. What am I going to do in the tight end? If it's going to be a tight end, at least let it be someone who did something. This ain't it for me. Then we have Sam Tecklenburg, another lineman out of Baylor. Matt Rule said, I'm going to sneak this last one in. Look, Sam's a guy who played under Rev Rule for 3 years, so obviously they have a connection there. They have an understanding. And he was going to stop playing football after college. And then his old coach hit him up and said, hey, look, how the application game working right now for you, bro? You can't get a job? Look, man, how about this? I'm going to sign you to a little contract. Come over to play in the NFL for a little bit. Maybe, I got a team that there's a lot of confusion on the interior of the O-line, bro. I know you played guard and some center. Hey, there's a lot of confusion going on the interior of the O-line. Maybe I can hit you with six figures. What job you going to get right now that's going to pay you six figures right now, Sam? Huh? All right, come down to Charlotte. Come down to Charlotte. Tell your mom. Tell your mom. Yep, tell your mom. Come down to Charlotte. Okay, I'll see you soon. All right. And that's how it went, really. He said, look, Sam, we have a need, and he could make the squad off of being a pocket pick, but also a guy who has some experience in two positions where we could use a small amount of improvement or any kind of clarity. So that's a pick right there. That's a guy who I think has a shot, but he's not one of the guys who I think has a very, very strong chance at making the team, to the point where I'm saying, if you made me bet $100 on it, I would say yes, they make the 53-man roster at the end of August. So it is what it is. These guys could have impact. I think maybe 7 or 8, 9 of these guys have a strong chance of making impact if they made the squad. A few other guys could make it as special teamers. But either way, those are the 17 undrafted free agents the Panthers picked up after this draft. What do you think about all these guys? Who do you think are the guys who are going to have the best shot at making the team? Do you agree with any of my analysis? Do you not agree? If you know anything more, want to share anything more about any of these players, let me know in the comments below. And you already know what to do with that like button.
Cheers to you, appreciate the chance. Been told y'all I been the man. Been told y'all I had the gift. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Real ones gonna recommend. Count this as another win.